Hi everyone, my name's Darryl Panes, CEO of As Good as Gold Australia. And this evening, once again, I'm joined by my brother Brian,
Thank you, Darryl.
Partner at As Good as Gold. And tonight we're privileged to again interview a very special returning guest. He is the founder and managing director of Matterhorn Asset Management and Gold Switzerland. I speak of none other, of course, than the one, the only, the legendary Egon Von Greyerz. Good evening, Egon.
Gentlemen, how good to see you, Brian and Darryl. I always enjoy speaking to you, and it's fantastic that we can sit here at opposite ends of the world and have just a chat. But it's not just a chat, of course, because we have some important things to discuss, as always. But it's very nice to discuss these with you in particular.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Egon.
Thank you. It's what is interesting. We have had numerous remarks of late, Brian, about that wonderful backdrop that Egon is sitting in front of
Looks
right
gorgeous
now.
in our summertime.
Yeah, they say, Egon Von Greyerz, he's the gentleman with that beautiful snow-clad peak in the background. Everyone talks about it here in Australia because we don't get to see that much of that, anything like that.
No, not in Adelaide anyway.
No. So, look, here in Australia at the moment, I've got to say this. Today, as we speak, Egon, I see the global financial system teetering on a knife's edge. I mean, it's in a precarious position, isn't it, Brian?
Oh, absolutely, Darryl. I mean, as much as we were talking about this before with Egon about remaining positive and wanting to do things and see things, see new things, you wake up every morning, you just wonder when the next bomb's going to drop. It doesn't have to be in the Ukraine. It can be Thailand, Taiwan. It can be in any number of countries. It is upsetting. There's no doubt about that.
Yes. I mean, look, just today, over the last couple of days, there are growing concerns in Australia over the future of super. Peter Dutton, the opposition leader, slammed the Labor Party, our current government, claiming that retirement savings are under attack in the May budget coming up. So he referred to the fact that the government, but this is surprising, of course, comes as a great shock, that the government lied about this and said they would not impact on super policies. And yet now they are clearly looking at making some adjustments. What are those adjustments? What are they looking at? Egon, they're looking at reducing tax concessions on higher income earners. Well, that doesn't come as a surprise, does it? Really, that they would even consider that.
Tax the rich or semi-rich.
Yeah, right. Those people that have worked hard all their lives to manage to put together $1 million or two, we're going to tax them more heavily. Reducing and or eliminating your ability to access funds prior to your retirement. So over here, Egon, you've been able to, under certain circumstances, access funds if you needed them desperately. Typically to purchase your first home. But that's going to be made difficult or more difficult now. Or use some of your funds in the case of an emergency. That could have been typically during the pandemic. You lost your job, you needed funds, you could go to your super and you could access some funds there. So this is all being reconsidered. And I look at it and I think to myself, we have a bankrupt government here in Australia. They are over $1 trillion in debt, well over $1 trillion. And they're looking at this dangling carrot at the moment, and that's what it is, and they want to retain it. Now, just a further extension, once again, of gaining more and more control over our money, not theirs, and our economic future. So we have reasons to be concerned.
I've always been concerned with excess government, Darryl. That's it.
Oh yeah,
because you give them an inch and they take a mile.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, there's only one step, then there's another step and another step. Okay, so I want to get back to this in a moment, Egon, because I think the next part of the question I ask you is probably going to incorporate some of this type of thing anyway. I want a response from that. But We know that you know a lot about this. Your knowledge on monetary history is huge. And there has been over 3,800 fiat currencies over the last 5,000 years that I know about. And none of them exist today except for one. And all of the rest have gone to zero, as we know. How does the US, this is my question, how does the US let go of its dominance? And how, in your opinion, does the world go from a fiat currency standard to a gold standard without a war taking place? Your views. Thank you.
Well, first, I think you started with a very important point and something that I have discussed many times, which is there won't be any pensions within the next, let's say, 10 years to take a longer period, because things don't happen always as quickly as we expect. There will be no pensions forever in the West. I mean, first of all, most pension schemes are underfunded today, and most people, or a lot of people, don't have pensions at all. But the ones that are there, consists of these bubble assets, stocks, bonds, and property, and they will implode these assets, and people won't have any pension. That's the first point. And governments, as you rightly said, what can they do then? They can only print money, but first they will steal from the rich, as you pointed out. So pensions will disappear, and taxes, especially for the rich, will go up dramatically. Because I think at the end of this era, which is the collapse of the West, which will take a number of years, as I said, but we're seeing it now; it's happening, and then the gradual transfer from Western hegemony to Eastern and Southern hegemony. That's starting now, but it's going to take a number of years. But during that transition, taxes will go up dramatically. Of course, there won't be much money to tax because people will be worse and worse off. But especially the rich, they will take whatever they can from the rich. Every government will do that. And in the end, we will most probably, at some point within the next 10 years, could be 5, but we'll probably have communism, socialism, Marxism in most of the West, because that's the only way they can deal with this. And of course, it won't be only, let's say, Marxism, but it will also be digital currencies in the West. I'm talking about it. I think this is the West which is really bankrupt, and the East which will be on the rise. It won't be easy for the East and the South either, but it'll be a lot easier though for the indebted West. And therefore, as part of this restructuring, if you want, or reset, and everybody has a different definition of reset. But it's clear that these currencies are going to, that we have now, as you pointed out, every single currency has always gone to zero throughout history, and the current monetary system, which started being under real attack from '71 when the gold window was closed by Nixon. All currencies then, as we all know, have gone down 97 to 99% in real terms, which is against gold, of course. So we only have, as I pointed out many times, we only have another 1 to 3% to go for this currency system to totally disappear, and that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I think it will happen faster rather than slower. So now then it's a question of course, which currency will die first. Well, it doesn't really matter. When you have a race to the bottom, there's no prize for getting first to the bottom. But you take the euro as an example. The euro is now, I never thought the euro would survive anyway without the problems what we have now. But at the end of an era, you have to get these surprises which exacerbates the situation. And of course, Europe and the EU has committed an incredibly serious error by following the orders of the United States and accepting these sanctions. And then they've obviously shot themselves in the foot or in the heart even, or in the head, They're now going to fall faster than they would have done because of this, because the economies are gradually collapsing here in Europe. We don't see it on a day-to-day basis, of course, but the trend will be very clear. And so therefore, the currencies all currencies cannot go down against each other at the same time. So probably euro will be weakened now for a while, and maybe because of that, or for the next few years, and then disappear one day. And you take the UK, for example, so you still have these remainers in the UK who want to go back to the EU. I mean, they don't know what they're talking about. EU will be in such trouble, so they should be happy that they have some freedom outside of the EU. But nevertheless, so the euro will be the weakest currency probably, and therefore the dollar will temporarily, it may be the next, I don't know how long, benefit from that, in spite of the fact that the dollar is also a totally rubbish currency and in a bankrupt country. But nevertheless, the dollar will probably temporarily be strong relatively. But if we measure it in our terms, which is in real terms against gold, they will all go down against gold, of course, including the dollar. But as I said, the euro will probably go down faster, and your Australian economy is also a bubble economy, and I would guess the Australian dollar will also be very weak. And then yes, I think sadly we will have digital currencies in a lot of Western countries, because that's the only way that they will try to fake the situation, governments and central banks, by saying, well, we now have a new currency and we write off all the old debt and put it aside, and then we have a new currency and we forget about that debt. Because you can never forget about debt, because that's the default. And if you write off debt in some artificial way, which they will try, or have moratoria or a debt relief of some kind, that if you write off the debt, then of course the assets that were financed by this debt will also come down, and this is what we will see. So we will see an implosion of asset values. We will see debt in some countries, hocus pocus, disappearing somewhere, but debt can never disappear without the economy collapsing also. And then many countries will introduce digital currencies, and that is the worst thing that can ever happen to us, of course, because that is total control of the people. Again, it'll be a temporary phenomenon, but temporary can last a long time. Communism was temporary in Russia, but it lasted 70 years roughly, a bit over 70 years. So artificial things that shouldn't happen, that are not real, can last a lot longer than we would like. And as I said, if you take communism in Russia, that was a couple of generations it lasted. So digital money, of course, will be total control of the people now. So anybody who can should, of course, avoid to live in a country where there will be digital money. I think it will only be in the West. Now, Switzerland, for example, have just declared that, and that's in this constitution, that paper money, the Swiss paper money, will always remain a currency that people can use. So Switzerland has no rush to digital currencies, but they've made it clear in the constitution that the paper money, that Swiss, you pay cash more than most countries, actually, that will always be legal tender. So that's a good sign, I think, and it shows also that Switzerland has no intention, of course they can change their mind, but they have no intention at this point to go purely to digital currencies. So that, I think that's very encouraging, because the control that governments will have by being able to turn off your money or turn on your money or charge you fines or whatever, that is a horrible thought. That's a totalitarian state. And maybe after the credit collapse in the West, that's what's going to happen. So people who have a chance to have another place to go to, and that's obviously will be a very small percentage. I mean, they should seriously consider that. getting out of the Western financial system. But for most people, that's not possible. So that's so therefore, the currencies, yes, will go to zero. Will take a few years, and in the US, once it defaults, which might be later because other, as I said, Europe will have problems first. But once US defaults, that's the end of the Western system, and that's coming.
Do you think we can do it without a war? Do you think we can get through this without a war? Without the, let's say, the war at the moment in the Ukraine developing into something far more significant?
I'm extremely concerned about this war. You have to be optimistic in life, but the thing is, I try not to worry about things that I can't do anything about, and I definitely have zero influence, like all of us, on this war situation, and therefore, I'm quite clear that this is a very, very, very dangerous situation, for the simple reason that the US, that is now still running this show, has no interest at all in peace talks. They're only interested in sending money and weapons to Ukraine, and telling the rest of the West that they control totally, and the West are stupid to follow. But the Western, especially Europe, especially, are also sending weapons and money to Ukraine. And my view is that, because I've written articles about it. In life, you have to always wear somebody else's moccasins, not only your own. This is old Indian saying, American Indian saying, that before you judge somebody, you must walk 3 moon laps in his moccasins. And of course, I've written about it also. You walk in Putin's moccasins, and you can understand why he's doing what he's doing. And of course, you can also then wear the American moccasins, that America will want to have a total hegemony in the world, and control every country that they want to control. And therefore, for them, it's unacceptable that Russia becomes a superpower. Remember, Russia has 75 trillion of natural resource reserves, biggest in the world. So once Russia is properly managed with more of a market economy, it'll be one of the strongest countries in the world. And since now we're moving gradually from west to east, you will have these commodity countries that will play a major role. That's why BRICS will be very important, the BRICS countries. And then of course you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Asia, so you have all of this going to happen, but these major moves take quite some time. But that's what we're going to see. But coming back to the war, China has just declared, and that's the Ministry of Defense that's issued a document. And it's almost like a declaration of war, where they totally reject U.S. hegemony and saying that it has major perils, and they attack it. It's a long document, and that should be read by everyone, because this is in every aspect of what the U.S. is doing. So it is culturally, it's militarily, it's technically, it's financially, and in all areas, basically, they are attacking that the US is interfering around the world and trying to dominate everywhere. And the Chinese, this is an official document saying that is unacceptable. Major nations should not interfere in other countries' affairs. And so it is an indirect declaration of war against the US, this, without naming the US. A very important document. As always, anything happening in the East, if you read the Western-dominated press, dominated by mainly US, and everyone you talk to, they only read that in the West. They only read the US-dominated media, and therefore nobody ever understands the other side. But there's so much important things being said by China in this case, Putin and Russia also. I think, China is definitely not accepting what the US is doing. I would be surprised if they don't at some point take Taiwan whenever it suits them. And let's face it, my view is that, these weapons and money that's sent to Ukraine is just killing a lot of people unnecessarily, that all wars do. Russia has probably lost 150,000 soldiers. Ukraine has also lost something like 150,000 soldiers, plus all civilians, plus all injured. But but Ukraine has probably lost half of its army. It's desperate for them already. They're trying to get NATO in, but right now, US is, of course, afraid to putting NATO soldiers in because they know that takes us closer to World War. So coming back to your question, I think the risk of war is very high. Remember, Russia has never invaded West really at all in history. They pushed the Germans back into Berlin when they had been attacked in the Second World War, but otherwise they're only gone east. That's where their interest lies, and that's where it will continue to lie, and not west. But I think the way that the West is behaving, which is the US primarily, I love the US people, I love US as a country, but the politics, I think, are not acceptable from the US. And the fact that Europe is just a slave accepting every instruction, that Europe is following every instruction from the US, I think is very sad and very dangerous. So yes, the risk of war is very high because you only need a little mistake somewhere and a false attack in one country, and then some other country then sends a nuclear bomb or a missile. Russia is not going to lose this war. They're not going, in my view. Whatever the West says that, they're losing that battle. Russia is not going to lose it. And even if NATO starts sending troops, then at some point, China will send weapons and troops also, if that happens. Then we are in a world war. Many people say that we are in a world war already, and there are lots of NATO soldiers in Ukraine. They just, as one Austrian colonel or major, that you only need to take off your uniform, and then you can go to Ukraine as a mercenary, and that's what they're doing. Of course, US also sending people in civilian clothes as helping the Ukrainians, maybe not at the front of the war front, but still as assistance and technical, etc. So the situation is very grave, and I think yes, the risk of some nuclear war starting is high, and of course, again, Russia is superior. Their missile system is far superior to the US system. The US knows that. Even the US generals are saying that. So they want to delay the situation until they get better technically. But yeah, no one can predict what's going to happen. We have to pray and hope that that they come to their senses eventually. But since no one is sending us, not from the West, Europe has nothing to say. They just follow the US, and US, as we know, have zero interest in starting peace negotiations with Russia now. They want to beat Russia. And therefore, it's a very, very difficult situation. I'm sorry, I'm taking a long time on this, but this is going to last. At best, the war will be localized around Ukraine and last many years. At worst, something much more serious will happen. And no one knows if and when that would happen.
Mm. No, look, it is a very serious situation. I know that... and I think people are only just starting to come to grips with the decimation of the economy right now, and are starting to recognise how bad it might get. There was a gentleman by the name of Joel Gibson, who is a money columnist for The Age, which is a major newspaper over here. And he said, look, this was only yesterday, and he said on mainstream media, look, a lot of people out there at the moment think that all they need to do is go short of a coffee one coffee a day, take a cut lunch, and save a few dollars in that manner, and everything will be okay. And he said, look, I'm in this with you. And he said, I know what's required. And he said, there are some really serious decisions that people are going to have to make. And he highlighted them. He said, typically, he said, you can't go think at the moment about saving $50 a week or $100 a week. He said, you've really got to get aggressive. And he said, you've got to go interest only on your home if you have a mortgage. Interest only, that your repayments will be less. If you've got a second car, house it, put it in a garage somewhere, or sell it, because the cost of running a second car is really significant. Rent a room of your home, or rent the whole home and go into something smaller that you might be able to afford. Private health care, forget about private health and go to public, which will save you a considerable amount of money. And your children should go to public schools that are private schools. And so this would save the average household a couple of $1,000s a month, $2,000 or $3,000 a month, which is what they will need to be able to service their loans on their mortgages. This is where we are heading now. And once again, Egon, we are only in the infancy of this whole debacle. So long way to go and hard times ahead. I've got to say at this point in time, thank heaven I own gold in this situation. But your thoughts, Egon?
We have a global debt of 300 trillion that's gone from basically nothing 50 years ago. And as I have been writing about in my articles, we have derivatives outstanding, which officially by the Bank of International Settlement in Basel is a bit over 600 trillion. That was reduced by half about a bit over 10 years ago, 12 years ago, which was they just reduced it and showed one side of the risk or the outstanding liabilities. But of course, if one party fails, that means and counterparty fails also, it's double. So it is. It was already then 1.23 quadrillion. And my view is now that we are well over, this has grown exponentially since then, derivatives, so that we are well over 2 quadrillion in my view. And a lot of that is debt. It's just another form of debt. And over the next 5 years or so, I think that debt will translate into real debt as central banks have to try to rescue these banks that have issued these derivatives when counterparty fails. And we saw a small example of that in the UK pension market when UK had this mini budget and Liz Truss was prime minister for a short period, and the market didn't like the policies that they came out with, which I think, but market was probably artificially manipulated to get that government out. But whatever. But then it came out that the UK pension market was on the verge of collapsing because they had covered their liabilities in derivatives. So and these derivatives were to generate short-term cash flow to pay out. So now when pension funds are also, which we know they are speculating in the derivatives market, it shows you the extent of the problems we will have. And as I said, I think gradually that central bank will have to intervene and try to save the banks initially. And in the end, a lot of those derivatives, a big part of it will become debt. And so I consider those couple of quadrillion or so on top of the debt of 300 trillion. I see that as a form of debt too. And then you could see how we get a hyperinflation when they have to print money to cover all of that. And you can see what will happen to interest rates. And you think about, the interest rates, if they get back, which I'm sure they will do in the West, they will get back to the 20% of the 70s and early 80s. Who can pay 20%? Nobody. So again, it will only be paid by printing more money. So we will have this vicious circle of debt and money printing, whether it be in a digital form or in the current form of money. It doesn't matter, because in the end, the digital money is just paper money also, or fake money. So in the end, that will have the same hyperinflationary effect. And I think that's what we will see within the next 5 years, let's say, or starting within the next 5 years. It's going to be, it's going to be very tough for the West. But I think the East and the South are not going to be in the same situation. They don't have the same debts. They have underlying commodities and economies that will avoid the worst of this. But of course, when it is a global situation, everyone will suffer.
Yeah.
Yes, as much as I have saved very consistently in gold and silver, I think I better double up. Yeah. I'm not kidding here. You just need as much as you can possibly can afford. I'm going to move away, Egon, from the great talk that we've had so far, but I want to get to another point, maybe on a better note. This one's about silver. I was listening to a interview. Interviewing a Mr. Chen Lin. This was at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. He gave a speech on what he thinks silver and solar panels growth will be. Presently, the new solar panels that are being manufactured are using 75% more silver to have greater efficiency in the solar panels that we use. Egon, we have seen silver at $50 twice in the last 30-odd years. So is silver going to be the next lithium? And when do you believe we will see triple-digit silver? Or, we don't want to talk about price range or whatever, but we've had $50 twice now. Anything under $100, which is triple-digit, would be nice to see because it's only $21, $22 at the moment. So do you see silver coming of age because of its an industrial aspect, or do you think that the monetary metal will come about even sooner?
Yes, to both. I've tried to avoid more and more forecasting prices because to forecast prices of the precious metals is totally useless if you don't tell me at the same time, or if we don't define at the same time what's going to be the value of the currency you measure it in.
Sure.
So because that's what it's all about. There's nothing about gold and silver going up. It's about the value of the currencies collapsing as they have done throughout history. And this time, since debt is bigger than it's ever been in history, therefore the collapse of the currencies, well, they can only go to zero. But that's going to happen. And since so with that massive outstanding debt, so that and of course during this period when this happens, the metals will not only reflect the decline of the currencies, but they will reflect the fear in the world that everything is going to disappear value-wise. So therefore, the metals will overshoot dramatically on the upside and do more than just reflect the decline in the purchasing power of the paper money, in my view. And of course, when these things happen, we know that we all consider gold to be that's the king of the metals. That's the real wealth preservation investment or holding, and therefore that should be the majority of anybody's precious metals portfolio. But we also know that when the metals move up, silver normally moves at least twice as fast, and maybe faster. And since there is an incredible deficiency in silver, also, as you stated, due to the industrial demand we will have, so that's a double whammy for silver. I think the silver price and the metal price will more reflect the monetary situation in the world than the industrial situation, because if we get these downturns in the world that we expect, even if the East is on the up, that will take time. So that therefore, I think the determining factor for the metals going up will be the monetary situation rather than the industrial one. But the industrial one will certainly help, as opposed to when it comes to silver, because there are, every year there are physical shortages of silver, and has to be borrowed or lent. And we know that the futures markets also there's no chance of covering the outstanding paper market when people ask for delivery. So silver will go up much faster than gold in the coming years, and of course the $50 will be nothing. So we, as you said, we were there in 1980, in January 1980, and we were there in 2011 at $50, and it's quite amazing that silver is now less than half of that value, while gold is at least. Gold in dollars is at the levels it were more or less in 2011. But of course, gold in other currencies, as we all know, in most currencies, gold is a lot higher than it was in 2011. If you take Australian dollars or in euros or in pounds or in yen or whatever. So it's just that we temporarily have a stronger dollar, so overall, gold has done very well. It's just that the dollar is overvalued right now. But yes, so no, silver will be spectacular in my view. And in today's money, I would expect silver to go into the hundreds of dollars in today's money. But we won't have today's money, and there's no use measuring it in any other money that we don't know what it is at this point, or how far it will go. But remember that the silver is not for widows and orphans. It's a very volatile investment. So therefore, my recommendation is to hold a lot less silver than gold, because gold is the king of the metals, and that's the one that really counts. But for somebody who want to have a bit of fun, to have a bit in silver, it will be an incredible ride. But also sadly, most people only buy when it's gone up a lot. People will buy when it gets to 50, and then maybe it'll go to 50, and then it will correct down to 30 before it goes to 100. So therefore, and people will then get out at the wrong time. So the only time to buy something when it's unloved and undervalued. But sadly, most people buy things when it's on the front pages and it's already gone up a lot. And that's what's going to happen now also. So we will see massive investment in metals, at much, much higher levels. And now, there's a lot of talk and you see people writing about this massive demand of gold, etc. And people can't even deliver the gold. But that's at the retail level, and that's gold coins and small amounts. At the bigger level, and especially the one where we are in for bigger investors, and then if you take institutional, etc., you can look at the ETFs, how the gold holdings in the gold ETFs have collapsed, and that's what reflects also what's happening with the price. So although there is a big retail demand and high margins in gold and silver for small coins, there's no big demand at the higher level, and therefore that's why we see gold going sideways now, and silver also. But that will change. Gold is in a strong uptrend. Central banks are working for gold and silver investors every day by destroying the value of the paper money, and therefore over time, anyone who holds gold and silver and who has patience is always going to be very safe with this investment, because we know that the central banks and governments will always destroy the currencies. So don't take a short-term view on the gold or the silver. Buy it when it's cheap and nobody wants it, like now, very undervalued now. And then just hold it for as long as you can, as long as you don't, and don't spend it and don't take profit, because this run that's going to happen in the metals now is going to last many years, because we're looking at the destruction of a currency system, especially the Western currency system.
Before I finish and go on to the next question, I'm not going to harp on this, and I don't want you to believe that I think your answers are fantastic here. But I'm going to ask the question a different way. Gold to silver ratio. Presently 85-1. Right? Ridiculous. Keith Newmeyer, he owns a few silver mines in South America, and they can't get any better than an 8-1 extraction of gold to silver. But the ratio of prices is 80 to 85 to 1. Do you think that this 85 to 1 will come back to approximately 30, 45 to 1, in your opinion?
Yeah, so if you're absolutely, so look at it technically, we are obviously first target is the 30 level. That's where it was in 2011. Was at 30 level when gold went to 1900 and silver to 50. So that's the first target. But it will probably just technically bounce at the 30 level, I would say, because that was the low that everyone focuses on. So now, but the long-term ratio, as you say, throughout history, is certainly 15, and the nature is probably 10. That ratio, silver to gold. So yes, I definitely think that we're going to see, as I said, the silver will go up at least twice as fast, and maybe even faster than that over coming years. But as I said, it will be with incredible volatility. So people who buy high will get scared and get out, and so that's very dangerous. But no, to answer your question, yes, I definitely see those kind of levels in the gold-silver ratio in the next few years. If you have a 15 ratio, I think that makes 666 on if gold goes to 10,000, let's say, and a 15 ratio, I think that becomes 666 silver, for example. I wrote an article many years ago about that. I know that people don't like 666, but
I'll guarantee you the silver customers will like 666 if it refers to the dollar value.
Absolutely.
But depending on the inflation of the dollar. Okay, move on to the next question. Right, Egon, the Russian Finance Ministry's National Wealth Fund, published on February 10th this year, stated that the fund will only hold Chinese yuan, physical gold and rubles. There will be no US dollars, euros, or any other currencies in the fund. The ratio will consist of 60% yuan, 40% gold, and in any other way and this in saying in another way is saying de-dollarization policy is playing out. As I see it, Egon, gold is now starting to be used as money, especially between Russia and China. So what do you see in the next 12 months with regards to other countries joining them, Russia and China?
To understand what they're doing, here you have a country where a US-led confiscation has basically frozen all of their assets that are outside of Russia. And so if they have had assets in dollars or in euros or other currencies, but that's gone basically. So so here you have a country that just confiscates holdings of other countries. And for whatever reason, we already discussed that situation, so we don't need to discuss why and how. But nevertheless, as a prudent investor, why or as a prudent finance ministry, of course you can't hold your currencies anything else but the values that you can trust. Gold at home you can always trust. Gold in your own country, nobody can take away from you if they don't obviously invade the country and take it, which the US has done with many countries. But nevertheless, Russia, I'm sure they don't expect to be taken over by the US. And therefore, they feel safe with the gold. And of course, there are 2,000 tons, whatever they declare now officially. It's most likely a lot higher than that. And we don't know, but I'm sure that they are saving all the gold they can now, also from their own production and mines, etc. So it's probably a lot higher. But yuan is that's where the world is moving to the east, and that's going to be a trading currency. Gold will now take a major role in the world currency system as the other currency, as the Western currencies decline. Remember that this decline is only on the West. And when we talk about sanctions and what's happening in the world, remember the sanctioning countries, the US and the West, is not more than 15% of world population. So you have to remember that we're so West dominated. So we read the Western news and the news that are dominated by the US. But that's only 15% of the world population. The other 85 don't give a damn about what these confiscation by the US and sanctions. It's because South America, Africa, Asia, they're not affected directly by what's happening sanctioning, and they're not following any of the U.S. Instructions on confiscation. So therefore, we're talking about just a smaller part of the world, and that's why you have to be optimistic on the rest, because the rest is moving forward and moving forward in structures, as I said, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, etc. And more countries want to join the BRICS, and the BRICS are probably going to at some point issue their own currency, whether that will be gold-backed or linked to gold. I'm not in favor of gold-backed currencies because they can always be manipulated, but there might be some loose linkage or whatever. So that's the positive side of the world. A lot's going to happen. The transition would be long and difficult, but that's where the world is moving. And there's always been East and West dominance throughout the thousands of years of world economy. China's dominated many times. Right now it's the West, but the West is actually on the decline. So overall, this is just part of an ongoing world with shifts between various parts of the world. So overall, at the end of this, it's just Europe will be poor, and instead of having an au pair from some foreign countries in the East or Thailand or whatever, the Philippines, now they're going to be German au pairs in China in 20 years time, or an English au pair in China. So that's the natural forces of supply and demand. It's just going to be happening a bit faster now because of the debt situation, which will make it unravel a lot quicker than it would have done.
I've got to ask you, Egon, about Saudi Arabia and what sort of an impact they're going. We've been talking BRICS, and they look like the most likely candidate to join BRICS this year. The petrodollar, we all know, was very instrumental in giving the US dollar global status. Very, very responsible for where it is today, basically forcing countries to purchase oil out of Saudi Arabia in US dollars. Now, if Saudi Arabia, and we'll assume that they will be successful in joining BRICS, and they've declared already that they will accept currencies, alternative currencies and gold for payment for oil, surely that's going to have a massive impact on the prominence of the US dollar. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yes, of course it will do. And as I said, the dollar is on the decline, as we have all agreed, and is down 98% since 71. Yep. And it's still going to decline. People talk about a strong dollar now only because relatively it's been a little bit strong. But the strength, if you define the strength by as we said, against real money, it's gone down 98%. So the fact that it goes up a fraction of a percent in the short term is totally irrelevant. The trend is down. The dollar is going to die. Of course it is. Whether then, as I said before, the euro dies before that because of what's happening in Europe, that's irrelevant. So the dollar might be stronger for a little bit longer, but thereafter the US will default on their debts. Of course, no Western country ever calls it default, but they just fake it just issue some, as I said, some new currencies, etc. But they're not going to be able to pay their debts or the interest on their debt, whatever they say, whether they print or they create a digital currency, they are going to default. Technically, they will default. Fundamentally, they will default. So it's only a question of, is it 5 years, is it 7 years? But that's going to happen. And of course, yes, thereafter, and the petrodollar will be part of that. So, this is, as I said, when trends change, everything bad that could happen will happen, and the US will. The only thing they have now is the petrodollar. That's why we have US can still, with the massive debts that they have, and because of this liquidity into dollars, money going into dollars, and oil payments going into dollars. So it's a very clever scheme by that Kissinger helped to set up this petrodollar. But we come to the end of that because we're not going to be dominated by the West anymore. But as I said, it's not happening. It's not going to happen overnight. It'll just take a little bit of time, and then the dollar, together with most Western currencies, will be dead.
Thank you for that.
Egon.
Yeah, no, there is another geopolitical problem here that if Russia, together with Iran, if they really wanted to be nasty to the world, they could easily block the Strait of Hormuz. And if you look at the map, the Strait of Hormuz is where all the oil comes out of in the Middle East. And it's a very narrow gap between Dubai or United Arab Emirates and Iran, of course. And if they block that, and the US has no chance in stopping that, then of course roughly 50% of all the oil in the world, or 40, 50, would be blocked for a while. And of course, that would hurt Saudi Arabia short term. But these are the kind of geopolitical games that are easy to play today to actually make it very difficult for the West, even if, as I said, Saudi Arabia would then suffer short term. The oil is, as we know, incredibly geopolitical or political, and what is interesting also, of course, oil, gold. If you look at the oil gold chart or ratio, they go hand in hand with small fluctuations over 50, 100 years. So oil is going to go up, and gold is going to go up. There's no question.
Yeah, there's lots of more things to it than meets the eye for the average person, and especially for most people who just don't read on those subject matters. Yeah. Egon, I generally know the answer to this question, but I want you to answer it because I want our audience to know that there's more than just Darryl and Brian Panes talking about gold and silver. Central banks last year bought 1,135 tons. And this is a central bank of many countries. Bought 1,135 tons. Now, that is 1/3 of the world's gold coming out of the ground per year. All right, 1/3. So, Jim Sinclair often emphasizes be your own central bank. Egon, why, in your opinion, is it so important to own both gold and silver in its physical state? I want your opinion. I know you've mentioned it a number of times, but there's always new audiences coming through. So Darryl and I continually harp on it, but I want your opinion.
First of all, let's just emphasize that virtually all the buying by central banks meant that no Western central bank bought gold because they don't understand what's happening. And so it was all other countries but Western countries, which is, the Fed didn't buy, the European countries didn't buy. So it was mainly the East and the South, etc., buying. So because they are wise, they know what's happening. The West doesn't understand what's happening, sadly. During my long life, I always liked gold. And then in the 90s, I saw that the debt situation is going to get worse. The derivatives looking terrible already then. So then prepared for myself and then the business investment company I had at the time to invest in gold, and then we struck in 2002 because we thought gold was $300 to the ounce, and we thought that gold had now bottomed at 250, and it looked like the turn was up. And so obviously to me, gold has not been an investment at all, or a speculation. To me, it's just the obvious protection of your asset and the consequence of the total mismanagement of the world economy and the monetary system, especially by the West. And therefore, it's an easy decision, because physical gold, as we've been saying many times today also, is the only currency that has ever survived. So therefore, in a time of crisis and debt explosion, it was clear to me that it's the only thing to hold. But then when you hold it, you mustn't keep it in the financial system, which you're protecting yourself against. So therefore, to hold gold in a bank in a bank or in some paper form, or in some unsafe jurisdiction, that defeats the whole object of what you're doing. You've got to have control, either direct control or have it, store it in a place that is totally protected from these risks. So you're talking about private vaults. I mean, some people store it at home. I don't recommend storing it at home, because crime is going to increase dramatically. It's already increasing now in most countries, and therefore, people find out always in the end, because nobody can keep quiet about any secret almost. There was produced an article in the Daily Mail a few years ago that said, how long can a woman keep a secret?
What is this leading?
And the answer was 19 minutes, I think it was. They never asked how long a man can keep a secret, no. But I don't think it would be any longer than that. So the point is, don't store it at home. At home, you only store as much as you can afford to lose, in my way. In my view, however cleverly you think you've hidden it. So there are good vaults around the world that are very safe. You've got to have it in the right jurisdiction. Also, my view is that gold should be stored in. You should have at least a part of it outside of your own jurisdiction, so you can flee to your gold. Because if your country starts either taxing you massively highly or confiscating your gold, which I don't expect gold to be confiscated in any way, well, in any country, but I think confiscation would be in the form of taxes instead. Than actually much simpler for government to just tax you rather than having to get your gold from wherever it is at the time. So, but I think having it outside your own jurisdiction is an advantage, though, because it would be much harder for the government to get it back then, and therefore. So. I'm Swiss and Swedish, but I've lived in many countries. But from the political point of view, Switzerland is still the best country in the world by a big margin, in my view. We have here people power. Basically, you can have a vote on anything if you have a list of 100,000 signatures, and that becomes part of the constitution. So then. No other country has got this, and it's incredibly unique and an incredibly good form of democracy here. And it's a very sensible country. Now, some people around the world are worried the Russians are going to come into the West, etc., and take over all of Europe, etc. The Russians are not going to come in here. They have no interest in Europe whatsoever. They're trying to now protect, rightly or wrongly, you can argue that, but part of what was their own territory where there are Russians involved. That's what they're doing. Whether they have further intentions of going east, I don't know, but they're certainly not going. Historically, it hasn't happened, and they have no reason to go west, and they haven't even got the troops, etc., for it. And therefore, I have zero concern about Russia coming west. I'm concerned about the world as a whole, but not about movements going west. So therefore, I still think Switzerland is a very good jurisdiction to store gold. And of course, the most private gold vaults in the world are in Switzerland. We, for example, have one in the mountains, as you know, which is the biggest and the safest gold vault in the world, totally unique. But there are other vaults around the world. But you really got to choose your jurisdiction, and as I said, preferably not in your home country, or preferably at least spread your risk to another country also. So it's absolutely essential that people store their gold in a form where they have direct access themselves, when there is no counterparty at all between them and the gold. You always have to have one counterparty. If you dig a hole in the ground is your counterparty, because somebody can steal your gold, of course, from your ground. And the same with the vault. But you must have direct control of the gold in your vault. You mustn't let somebody, a middleman, have control of the gold. So you must be able to go to it directly yourself without anyone being able to stop you. That's the way we organize our storage for clients. The clients we are not the counterparty. We're just somebody organizes it in between. So yeah, I think, and then some people want to spread it to various jurisdictions, and of course. You could have, for example, a lot of people talking about Dubai now, but I mean, Dubai is on the one hand, now it's an economy people like because there are no controls, and a lot of Russians, tens of thousands of Russians have moved to Dubai. Problem with Dubai is there's not a democracy, and it's in the Middle East where we have regularly a lot of wars. So there's no 100% safe jurisdiction now, but it's all relative. So there are some good. Switzerland is very good. Singapore is good today, as long as there's not an Asian war starting. So we have to be now much more alert and warn our investors that we think we see this or we see this now. So maybe it's time to move some here or think about that. But that part of that is certainly not saying that Russia's coming west, because they're not coming west in my view. So store it outside the banking system, have full control of it. Yes, absolutely essential.
Has Egon given you incentive to go and buy some more gold?
Well, that plus I do have a little bit at home. I think I'll take that to the vault.
Have a look at the backdrop. There's a pretty serious incentive there to have your metal forwarded over there. That's for sure.
I do believe so. Yeah.
Egon, you mentioned Matterhorn Asset Management, of course. You've got the biggest private vaulting service in the world. It is unique. Could you tell our viewers and subscribers just a little more about what you have to offer there, so that I know that you have minimal investments that you'll accept. But if you could explain how it works, who would they contact? What do they need to do if they want to take this further?
So it's, as I said, we set this up initially for ourselves and a few people, friends that we co-invested with and advised, and then that was in 2002. Then 2-3 years later, there was people who were asking us, how can you help us too? And we did. So since then, yes, we are now. Have clients all around the world. We have vaults in obviously Switzerland, in the Alps. We have in Zurich. We have vaults in Singapore, and basically we can with partners organize vaulting anywhere. The good thing is also that if people are worried about one jurisdiction, we are very good at moving gold to various places, because people can't do that individually anymore. They can't just move from one country to the next, because the regulations and what is involved in shipping gold is becoming more and more complex. Therefore, they need a specialist. So that people who try to do it themselves, they might succeed once, and that will take them months. We can do it in days, basically, and we can move it again and again. So therefore, it's worth to have a professional organization that's helping you, especially in these times when you need maybe to think about another jurisdiction at a short notice. That's very, very important point that people don't realize that I can move it to my home country now. I'm worried about Europe, for example. But then what happens when US collapses and starts confiscating, or by taxes at least, everything? What do you do then? It's too late. You can't move out. So therefore, So we help people. It's very simple. We have a team that holds their hand when it comes to, you have to go through compliance, etc. But it's very, very quick. Then you go to our website called Switzerland.com, open an account, and then we'll help you with all the details. And then we buy the gold we buy from the Swiss refiners. Obviously, they are the biggest in the world. They produce 70% of all the gold bars in the world. And the highest quality gold. But you can buy coins also, or you can buy, just like you. I mean, you sell coins, you sell bars, and that's what we do too. But our passion is helping people. We're not there. We're not. It's not. We're not there just to make money. We're there really because we are passionate about wealth preservation, and we believe that there will be very tough times, and we believe that helping others is so important, and that includes obviously preserving their wealth, which is it's right what that person, that article you talked about is correct. Think about saving a little here, a little there on other things, a beer or whatever it is, or going to McDonald's, and instead buy a few grams or fractions of an ounce of gold every month. Because think about what happened in Venezuela. People who 20 years ago had bought a little bit of gold when the Venezuelan, it was the same as the US dollar 20 years ago, and now we have hyperinflation and it's worth zero. And if people had bought a little bit of gold then, that would have been a fortune for them today. A fortune. Think about, do it today and do a little bit, save a little bit every month of unnecessary expenses, and buy a little bit of gold every month, because when you get to the hyperinflationary stage, that gold is going to be so valuable to you and to your daily life.
Yeah.
Wise words.
Yeah, when you think 1 gram of gold is $100, it's in Australian dollars. It's not huge amounts of money. Anybody can put together $100 and buy a gram of gold.
Yeah.
If they do it regularly enough, they've got an ounce of gold. So, which is 30 grams or 32 grams of gold.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have been listening to a very wise gentleman. Another gentleman by the name of Charlie Tremendous Jones. Many years ago, unfortunately is no longer with us, but Charlie was a motivational speaker, Egon, and he'd say in 10 years' time you're going to be in exactly the same position, apart from two things: people you meet and the books you read. And he was so accurate. So tonight we've listened to Egon, and we've been chatting with Egon now for a few years, and we have learned so much in the process. And I think to myself, our viewers and subscribers should just find out wherever Egon presents or provides an editorial, whenever he's speaking, follow him on YouTube, follow him on King World News, and just learn. And it'll make you a much smarter person, a much better person in the process.
Egon's website, goldswitzerland.com. Yep. I mean, with yourself and Matthew Piepenberg, I mean, you just can't beat this information that you present. And so, it's all about the people you meet, books you read. The books you read are the websites that we go to.
How fortunate have we been that we've been able to connect with like-minded people and learn so much from them in the process. We thank you so much, Egon, for your contribution, as always. Peter Daniels, I've got to say, Peter Daniels is our lifetime mentor, but you would have loved to have connected with him, I'm sure, Egon, but he would say, I do not care what poorly executed economic decisions are made in the world tonight. Tomorrow, I'll still be able to party because he owns gold. He has reserves, which he said so many people fall so short of. So, and Jim Sinclair, of course, we always make reference to Jim Sinclair, become your own central bank. It's about the only thing about central banks that I'm in favour of. They own gold, and I will follow suit.
Yes.
So thank you again, Egon. Really appreciative. And we're also appreciative of our viewing audience, our viewers, subscribers, for continually supporting this channel. Thank you so much. And so until next time, all of us, stay well, stay focused. Goodbye for now.
And goodbye for now.
So much. I very much enjoyed talking to you, as always. Thank you.